this is my game on how I personally interact with like a chat GPT or like a Gemini or like a Claude. Now I'm coming from this as an angle of like somebody who knows how these systems work on a technical level. So I created a framework for how to write your prompts to be able to get the most out of the AI interaction, but in a way where it's not just spitting out an answer at you, but where it's taking your genius and your thoughts and helping you structure them, or and also teaching you along the way. So think about it like this. If I could talk to, let's say I have a business plan idea, right? The way chat GPT is by default, or any of these large language models is by default, is they've got all this data from all over the internet. And so when you ask it, hey, I want to create like an app for babysitters that connects parents with like background checked babysitters on demand, right? Come write my business plan. It's going to grab from the randomness of all of that to give you an answer. Now, why would I want to talk to some random person who I don't know the experience and the background that they have, versus I could turn it into like a business professor at Harvard that has like extensive experience creating these types of services. Like maybe you were the dude who scaled like DoorDash to its first $1 billion, right? And then engage with it in a way where it starts to ask me questions about my idea, and then starts to give me an answer based on my idea, not just based on whatever it grabbed out of all those terabytes and terabytes of data. You feel me? And so that framework I call chat in the hat, right? And I know it's a little funny framework, but it's really to help you learn how to think like an AI so you can talk to the AI in a way that amplifies your genius. So what does chat in the hat stand for? It's a 3-part framework when you're writing your prompt.
And this is extremely important, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't pay any attention to anything else, which shame on you if you did that, pay attention to this part, because this is extremely important, how to actually talk to AI to get the proper response. That's vitally important, because you can speak to somebody and it's like a human being, right? Like I could speak to somebody. You have to be educated enough to ask the question. So how I'm asking the question is going to determine the answer that I'm getting. That's not talked about enough. So what she's about to talk about is actually vitally important.
Especially because when you're talking to a large language model, like I mentioned before, it doesn't actually understand what you're saying. So it's not going to get the gist of it, right? You have to give it the specific instructions that you want it to execute. And the more specific and the more clear you give it, the more it'll answer in the way that you need it to. But again, it's just taking whatever prompt you give it and calculating based on that. So if you say, write me a business plan about an app for, connecting background check babysitters with parents, it's going to write something. But if I give it first a history, right, and then I give it an attitude, how I want it to complete that task, and then I give it a specific instructions on how to complete that task, the conversation is going to be completely different. So I'm going to do real quick is break down each component of this, and in real time live on the chat, we're going to make up an idea together, and I'm going to show you guys the difference between using just a regular prompt versus the chat in the hat framework. You feel me? So first, what is history? History is you want to tell it the relevant skills and experience that it needs to have to be able to help you accomplish that task. So if I have an idea for an app, me just talking to chat GPT, I don't know who it could be pulling from, versus giving it like, yo, you're an award-winning person in this field who has this specific experience and 20 years of that experience, right? You want to give it some type of history that it can refer to pull in that knowledge from all of those terabytes of data to specifically be using the knowledge that you need to complete your task. So if it's like a social media thing, right? You don't just want to go ask ChatGPT about how to make a viral social campaign. You want ChatGPT to like be an expert at generating viral campaigns. Like you made a company similar to mine have 50 million views on TikTok with your funny short videos, right? Then it kind of puts itself in that framing and starts to think from that lens. Then you want to give it an attitude, which is like, what is the mentality or the vibe that it has while doing the task? Is it helpful? Is it, playing devil's advocate? Is it, does it like to ask you questions and teach you how to do it instead of just giving you an answer, right? So you want to give it like the attitude, like how and what the vibe is that it uses when it's thinking about how to do your task. And then you want to give it the actual task, which is you need to specifically tell it what it should do and how it should do it. So let's deep dive into each one of these a little bit more. So first, with the history, again, you want to give it that relevant knowledge, experience, and accomplishments that a person would need to actually be useful to you in completing that task. So you say something like you are a award-winning business plan developer, right? Like you're a professor at Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford in creating startup business plans. Now, ChatGPT does know what these kinds of institutions are, and it's not going to know that like you can't be the chair of business at Harvard, Stanford, and at like Wharton and UC Berkeley all at once. Like it's not going to know that, but it is going to understand what it means to be like the chair of business at Stanford or the chair of the business school at Harvard, right? Because it has enough data to understand what those specific things are. And then you might want to give it some experience. Like you have you have 40 years of experience helping startups create business plans. You were the person who created the original business plan for DoorDash. Because if I'm thinking about Sitter as an app, right? Like this, babysitting connecting app, what's a similar type of service like a DoorDash or a TaskRabbit, right? Like you wrote the financial models for TaskRabbit that helped them be successful, right? And like you're an expert in creating business plans that like help startups scale and get investment money, because that's my goal. So even just there, me giving it those specifics about its history will completely change the way that I'm going to engage with this chatbot and the types of answers it's going to give me and the type of knowledge it's going to pull out to answer that. Right. So you could also say like you're an award-winning or world-renowned expert in this. You have number of years experience developing business plans at these companies. You have built this company, or you scaled this thing, or you created this product or this service. So if I flip it and I move to social media, like you are the leading expert in creating viral TikTok videos. You have 20 years of experience creating and leading viral campaigns on short form video campaigns on TikTok at like DoorDash, at Uber, and at Lyft, right? You literally grew Uber's TikTok following from 1,000 followers to over 10 million, and you've won several awards along the way, right? So you just start to think about the persona. If you could create the perfect person that you would talk to about this, even if some of the details are a little bit of BS, that's fine. But you want to create that perfect person that you want to talk to in person who's going to help you with that task. So that's the history. And then the attitude, again, is that energy, it's that mentality and that vibe that you want the AI to take with you while it's responding to you. And that has two components. The first is the style. Is it helpful? Is it curious? Is it critical? Is it more like evaluative? Is it pensive? Is it playing devil's advocate? Is it challenging? Is it excited? Is it like if you wanted to turn it into like a venture capitalist to like, review your idea, is it like a skeptic, right? You want to give it like a style of how it's supposed to be thinking about the answer it gives you back. And then you give it a tone. So like, is it going to respond in professional language? Is it going to be academic? Is it going to be formal, informal, casual, humorous, friendly, persuasive? Is it going to be urban? Is it going to be targeted at Gen Z or Gen Alpha, right? So when you're giving it that attitude, you've already given it the history. So now it knows what knowledge it's pulling from. Now you're just telling it, when you give me answers, this is how I want the vibe between us to be, right? So an example of that would be like, you are extremely helpful. You love sharing your knowledge to help people create business plans. You have a deep passion for listening to people's ideas and guiding them step by step to create business plans. And then you could add in some more stuff like, you prefer to help people learn how to help themselves. So instead of giving the right answer, you give them questions to help them think and come to the right answer for themselves. So the attitude section is typically a little bit shorter, but again, it's just telling it, all right, this is who you are. This is how you're going to step to me. And the last part, which is one of the most important, is the actual task, right? So the task is the specific details on what you want the AI to do and how you want it to do it. Now, oftentimes we only focus on the method, right? So we'll be like, yo, I want you to ask me a question and then provide an answer. Or I want you to explain yourself. Or I want you to give me positive and negative feedback on this idea. But we don't necessarily get specific enough to tell it the format that we want that in, right? So if you just tell ChatGPT to ask me questions about my idea, it's going to spit out like 20 questions for you, right? And then it's going to expect you to answer all of those. So that's very different than saying, ask me 1 to 2 brief questions at a time, wait for my response, and keep doing that until you get enough information to help me write my business plan. That's going to have a whole different interaction than if it spits out 20 questions and you don't even know how to answer them, and then it'll mess up the flow of your chat. So you could tell it like, hey, I want this in a list. So, hey, I want a list of 5 viral TikTok ideas to promote what I'm doing, and I want them to be the strongest. I want them to be funny, right? Or, hey, I want this in a table. So it'll literally output it in what looks like an Excel spreadsheet. So I want a table of ideas, and the first column should be the number of the idea, so 1 through 5. The second column should be a description of the video. The third column should be an explanation of why you think that video will work. And a fourth column will be what you think the cons are of that. And the fifth column will be what you think the pros are of that. Now answer my question. That's a lot different than just spitting out a list of ideas. Now you're getting information in a structured way for you to see how it thinks and why it thinks, so you can tweak it as you go. So an example of the task part would be like, right now you're meeting with me. I'm trying to create a business plan for my startup that will connect that'll connect parents to background check babysitters. First, I'm going to provide you with ideas that I already have about the business plan. Then you're going to ask me 1 to 2 brief questions at a time about my idea, about this app, that we want to build, until you have enough information to help us create a comprehensive business plan that will help us get investment from a VC firm. Along the way, you're going to provide positive and negative feedback, right? So that's going to completely change versus me saying, I want you to write me a business plan about an app that connects, parents to background check babysitters. Having that conversation versus a conversation that's done in this format, in this chat in the hat format, is going to be worlds difference. And instead of Chat GPT feeding you whatever answer it happens to calculate, it's now going to be taking in your actual genius, your actual ideas, and just helping you expand upon them and structure them in a way that lets you do stuff faster.